Perhaps you've heard about virtualization technologies, Chris.
Perhaps.
Well, there are tools out there such as VMware, such as Parallels and VirtualPC. But what about VirtualBox?
Well, we don't give a lot of love to VirtualBox, Brian.
We do not. However, VirtualBox 2.2 from Sun Microsystems is just released, and it's time we give it an in-depth look.
All right, we're going to get into the awesomeness that is VirtualBox in just a second. But before we do, we've got to say holla to our buddies over at GoDaddy.com. Use our code Linux, save yourself 10% off any order. Or, if you want to save some long-term cash, use our code Linux20 and save 20% off hosting plans when you check out at GoDaddy.com. Thanks so much to everyone who uses those codes. We really appreciate the support.
We do indeed. All right, let's get right into it. So was it about a week now since Sun has released the version 2.2.0.
You mean a week since we got all giddy and raced to download the latest version? Of
VirtualBox.
Right.
Which is kind of exciting. And I'm going to be very clear about this. There is one new feature in VirtualBox, the virtualization package, that really got me excited. And that is, of course, the openGL emulation. So they actually have the ability, and it's not really even emulation because it's native openGL.
Pass-through, kind of.
It's the pass-through stuff. But what this means is this is openGL, 3D hardware accelerated openGL for guests running under any platform that runs on VirtualBox.
Now,
this includes Linux. This is the exciting part.
Yeah, and there's been some products on the market that claim OpenGL support in the guest.
But
things like Compiz and the performance was horrible.
Yeah, the performance is no good. Now, VMware already supports, Direct 3D on Windows guests, even if they're running on Linux, which is great if you want to run, XP and play some games under Linux.
Right.
That's fantastic. But what if you want to have, let's say, the latest Ubuntu with Compiz rocking, with the emerald window decorators, with the swoops and the wiggles and the wobbles and the 3D desktop? You want all that.
Right.
And you want that in a guest. And now it's possible with VirtualBox, and really it's possible for the first time.
Yeah.
This is very, very exciting for me.
It's this has just been released. This feature has just been added to their latest edition, and the nice thing about it is essentially, as long as you have a version of Linux that has the ability to have the additions installed, which is kind of like their extra software package that includes different drivers and things like that.
And realistically, that includes just about everything. You're going to be able to do that on all the Ubuntu and Debian-based ones. You're going to do that in Fedora and OpenSUSE. And at that point, you've covered just about everything. Sorry, PC Linux OS folks. I don't know if it works for yours yet.
Now, just as a caveat, they've pretty much only tested it under Ubuntu and Fedora, I think.
Right.
But it pretty much if it's like 2.6.2.7 or later, or 2.6.2.5 kernel or later, you're good to go.
You should be good to go. Now, there have been some reports of problems with people running OpenSUSE guests with the OpenGL turned on, but just the same, as people also say it works great. So give it a shot. It works great in Ubuntu 9.04. If you want to download the beta of that, it works fantastic.
And what's cool about that, and I'll come back to the 3D thing in just a sec, but while you mentioned that, a lot of the virtualization products that are out there, mainly VMware and Parallels, if you go to install the additions or the VMware tools or whatever it is on a not officially supported version of a guest distribution, it'll throw up error messages and make you rebuild kernel modules and things like that. VirtualBox, whatever they're doing,
it's a very smooth experience.
Even all the way from like when you say install additions, it says, "Oh, a CD-ROM has been added. Would you like to auto-run this?" And you say yes, and it launches the install. You give it your password, and you reboot, and you've got
and it does its thing.
Support. And even on the latest Ubuntu beta builds, so that's really awesome.
And it works incredibly well.
And then once you do that, you get full 3D pass-through to your graphics card. So you're going to take a very slight performance hit, and then you're going to be at the mercy of whatever your 3D card on your main system is capable of.
Right. But if you've already got your 3D working under Linux or Windows or OS X even, you're going to be just fine. Now the great thing here is, of course, this for the first time allows a lot of Windows and Mac users who were never going to dual boot anyway to freely, because VirtualBox is free, to download the free VirtualBox, download the free Ubuntu or whatever, and try out Compiz on their main desktop and rock that out, and they with really no investment there. They just download it. They don't like it, they get rid of it. It's fantastic. Plus, for people like me, I can't live without my my Compiz desktop.
And VirtualBox is available pretty much for any desktop OS. Even
Right.
Open Solaris. You've got OS 10 versions, Windows versions, Linux versions.
And and Solaris, yeah.
Some BSD versions as well.
Yep.
So they've got a wide range. Your host operating system can be pretty much anything.
I think there's even like a semi-beta in development build for OS2 or something like that. I saw a screenshot on their website.
Awesome.
It's ridiculous.
Innotech is the people that originally made VirtualBox, and then they sold to Sun. But Innotech used to do a lot of work for OS2, so
Yep.
they're kind of
It's
big
very,
OS2
very,
guys.
It's very, very cool.
The speed of the 3D support, like I said, is pretty great, and the overall speed of the virtual guest is not bad. I don't know if it's on par as
No.
maybe like VMware Workstation.
It's not on
I'd
par.
say though it's faster than VMware Server or QEMU by a lot.
Yeah, I'll give it that. But VMware Workstation is much faster. It's much snappier.
Yeah.
But that said, that's not really a knock against VirtualBox.
And VMware
VirtualBox
Workstation is like
fast.
$300.
Right. This is completely free, and if you run VMware Workstation, you don't get Compiz in your guests. You don't
Right.
get OpenGL. Now, on the flip side, though, you run VMware Workstation. If you're running Windows as one of your guests, specifically XP, you get Direct3D and DirectX support. Whereas
That doesn't mean you get Arrow under Vista.
no, it does not. It does. That does
But
not
it does
work.
mean if you have a video game that
That just uses Direct3D and is
Right.
not like DirectX, Direct3D, I think 9C or something like that. With VMware, it works. Whereas under VirtualBox, you're kind of out of luck on that one. It's OpenGL or nothing.
right.
Now, I have seen some rumblings, some movement on the forum that maybe Direct3D hardware virtualization is coming, but I haven't seen anything specific about that. Obviously, we can't hold them to that because it's not here yet.
Before we get into some of the technical features of VirtualBox, I'll just cover one aspect to it that some people may or may not find very interesting. VirtualBox comes in two different flavors: a completely GPL'd free version that is called the open source edition, which you can
Right.
find the source code for and all that. And then they have a closed source version, which is still completely free. Not all of the code is GPL'd. And here's some of the things that they've added to the closed source one. Get this. Remote desktop protocol.
That's
same
very cool.
protocol that Microsoft uses when you remote into an XP workstation or a Windows server. You can take a remote desktop client, like our desktop for Linux or any of the actual Microsoft ones for Windows or Mac OS 10, and point them at the IP address of your host, and you will get a fully featured
It's cool.
remote desktop console.
It's really cool.
The other thing they do is they tie in,
And now that's remote desktop for any guest OS
Yes.
you're running.
And
whether
so
or not
at the
you
console
have
level.
you can install the guest edition tools.
Sure.
So now you could run OS2 or something else in there and RDP
any OS
into
that
it.
you have virtualized.
Very
You
cool.
get console through RDP. Now, here's the other thing they do, and I have not tested this, but it blows my mind. USB device support over RDP.
Right.
USB devices at the machine you're remoting from. So say you're at a machine where you have a USB printer, and you create an RDP session to your remote virtual guest.
Right.
You can bring those USB devices
The
with you.
USB device will show up in the guest over the internets as if it were locally plugged into a USB device.
Assuming your remote desktop client supports that. I do
Right.
not believe our desktop supports that, but the Mac and Windows
But-
version support that.
But still, I mean that's a very cool
That is,
tool.
I have to assume here, I've done some looking, I could not find an answer, but I have to assume here that VirtualBox licensed the RDP technology from
and
Microsoft.
that's why it's one of the closed source feature. It's got to be.
Yeah. And then another feature that is only available in the closed source version is the ability to have a virtual serial interface for your hard drives, which
Right.
gives a much better throughput between the guest and its virtual disk. But they've licensed some virtual CPU or some virtual serial ATA drivers, and so that's only in the closed source version. But if you do use the serial interface for your virtual disk, it's a virtual serial interface. You
It's
get
pretty
less
nice.
CPU hit on your host, and it's faster throughput.
You can't go wrong with that.
No.
So these are some very, very cool features. I mean, when you're looking at the various virtualization technologies out there, I mean, some of these features really stack up nicely.
Yeah.
I've got to say. Now, we
got
talked
some
a
really
little bit about
high-end stuff.
speed and all that sort of thing. I want to talk for a minute though about some of the problems with VirtualBox because.
Uh-oh.
You know,
So we've been doing a love fest so far.
and honestly, VirtualBox 2.2, I kind of freaked out about. It is beautiful. The features they added are fantastic.
I think before you go farther, though, let's preface this with, I think it's pretty much at the point where you could use it full time.
Yes,
you wanted to.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. We talked about VirtualBox a fair bit on the Linux Action Show, probably about a year and a half ago.
So.
And we basically left it thinking, it's fantastic, it's wonderful, but it's not quite there yet. It is there. VirtualBox is absolutely there. I could use it full time, no doubt in my mind. And I live currently in VMware. I mean, I'm being a software developer by trade, I need to be able to develop and test on a lot of different platforms and a lot of different revisions of different platforms. So I need a virtualization environment that's solid. Now, VirtualBox having the openGL support on the Linux side is killer, like beyond killer. It's fantastic, but few problems. First off, VMware offers you the cool ability to actually copy and paste files and drag and drop files directly between the host and guest systems.
Right.
This is very, very handy. If you want to be able to just drop in some code snippets, a few picture files, what have you, you can just grab it, drag it out into your host and drag it back into your guest. Back and forth, back and forth. It's very, very nice.
Very nice.
I want to be able to do that.
Cannot do
VirtualBox
that.
does not really offer anything like that.
Not yet.
And same with copy and paste. It doesn't really work there. So
and that's kind of a big one.
That's kind of a huge one. Now, I mean, you're running things within VirtualBox. Once you install the guest tools, you do have things like the smart mouse integration, so that you can just mouse in and out. You don't have to hit the release
key before your mouse goes out the window.
Right, so it doesn't grab your focus completely of your mouse and your keyboard.
That's nice.
Which is nice. But it really needs to step it up a little bit further. If they can get the ability to move easily in and out files, it doesn't even need to be drag and drop. A copy and paste will work fine.
They do have a shared folders feature, though.
Right.
And where you can specify a set of folders on your host that the virtual machine can see and read and write to.
Which is actually something I want to get to that VirtualBox does that's fantastic. Now, if you are used to VMware Workstation, and you run a lot of guests in VMware Workstation or VMware Player, I guess just Workstation, you're used to the shared folders feature being a little pokey.
Yeah.
It's not bad. It's very, very usable. I use it daily. However, you tend to notice that it kind of falls asleep a bit. And it tends to, stutter a little bit. Its performance is not quite killer. And also, when you're moving files back and forth between the share, the CPU hit is fairly large.
Oh, yeah, it is on Workstation. It's really large.
It's really large. Now,
what is with that?
It is kind of ridiculous.
That's a Workstation-specific thing, too, because
it is.
Their other products don't.
No,
have
on the
that.
server side, it's not that big of a deal. Now, however, under VirtualBox, it is lightning fast. It's like you're dealing with folders right there. You're moving around on your native system on the same hard drive. It is fast.
It's a lot more like it should be.
And it's like it should be. So really, there's just one or two small things that I would like to see VirtualBox add in that regard, and it would absolutely blow Workstation out of the water. Now, the final thing that I would like to see VMware that VMware has that I would like to see VirtualBox get is a little better support for managing your VMs. In VMware Workstation, you can say, I've created this Ubuntu 8.10 32-bit VM, which is great for testing. But what if you want to make a copy of that VM?
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying.
You can right-click on it and go, clone this virtual machine.
Yes.
Boom, you've got an exact clone of it. And the great part is, it's not just a snapshot. Snapshots are great. Snapshots allow you to revert back in time to different changes. And both VirtualBox and VMware have that, and it works great on both. And I use both a great deal.
Speaking of which, one VirtualBox caveat is by default, it does not store your snapshots and your virtual machines in the same directory. And so if you try to organize stuff, so all your virtual stuff's in one specific location,
you got to make sure you
watch for that.
Yeah, you
now, the
don't
plus
get
side
screwed up on that one.
is if you have a dedicated drive for your snapshots, it's very, very nice that you can move where your snapshots get stored at. So.
It's very, very handy.
Right, sorry, continue.
I actually prefer the way VirtualBox does it just because I like to have fine-grained control over everything, but it is not apparent at first. But I would like to see a little more features there. It's difficult currently to clone a VM in VirtualBox.
What's funny about that, though?
And here's why it is that way. In order to create a new virtual machine in VirtualBox, you have to create a new drive. In order to create a new drive, you get launched into this whole separate user interface for just managing your drives. The problem with that is, if you, let's say, drop into your file system and make a copy of your drive and try to bring that back into VirtualBox, it won't let you. Because then two drives have the same ID. Now, it won't allow that. So there is no way within VirtualBox to copy a drive.
At least not within the GUI. There might be something. There is a whole command line interface.
Unless not any way that I've seen, because if you just simply copy the drive,
it has the same ID.
It has the same
but
ID.
But there must be a way to edit the ID.
Modify the ID. But see, this is the problem.
Now, what's interesting though is
it should be a very clear thing. Make a copy of it. Boom, you're done.
They have the one of the nice things that VirtualBox does is it has a virtual machine descriptions all in XML format. So the theory being, you copy that XML format, drop it in there, and you have an identical config.
But that's the thing is,
it's just the guest settings.
In that case, though, it doesn't include the drive. It's just the description of the guest,
but it's funny
which doesn't really do you any good.
It's funny that they made that connection. That they wanted you to be able to take the XML and have an identical config, but not the drive. Yeah,
the drive is a major pain in the butt. What it is.
You mentioned that like virtual disk manager. They have the same thing.
It's confusing.
They have the same thing for their ISO images. Like if you want to give an ISO to a guest, you want to, like, for example, if I'm loading Ubuntu, why burn a CD when I could just read it'll fake out the CD-ROM as an ISO from an ISO image.
Right.
But you have to add that to the library. Good and bad, because now it's always available to me, and all of the virtual machines,
and you can just quickly see it. Boom, it's there.
They all can pull from it.
However,
that's nice.
However, but then what happens if you, let's say, just want to install a beta of Fedora? I want to install the beta of Fedora.
A one-time deal.
Yeah, you put it in. You just throw it on your desktop. Install it. Well, now you're done, and you've deleted that ISO. Well, it's still in the VirtualBox manager.
You have to remove
and it gives you a little error, and it just screws up.
And I would rather just be able to say, no, just look at this ISO on the file system. I don't know if this is something that they have done to work around the fact that they support so many different desktop platforms.
Right.
There might be a way that they're accomplishing that. So there are pros and cons. If I'm on a server, and because VirtualBox does have a headless mode, and if I'm on a server, then I'm probably always using the same set of ISOs pretty frequently. That's going to be nice.
It actually is kind of handy.
And because on the command line, you can refer to something in your ISO library. So you can say, VBox Manager, connect to ISO this name, and it will connect to that ISO image. That's pretty cool.
Yep.
But there's some plus and minuses there. So something you just have to work. It's a little bit different workflow than VMware.
I honestly would like the guys at Sun, who now owns VirtualBox. They purchased it from Innotech a little while back. I would like to see that dev team take a look at, and I hate to say this, guys, but take a look at what VMware Workstation is looking like and offers in terms of features for managing the VMs, and implement just some of those features. You can do it in your own way within VirtualBox. The ability to clone easily, the ability to just a little quicker and easier manage the ISO images perhaps that you want to mount. These sorts of things would be a major benefit to those of us in the desktop side of things for virtualization.
Now, we've dogged on it a little bit, so I want to talk about a couple of nice things that VirtualBox is doing.
There's a lot of nice things.
That VMware hasn't even introduced yet in the Workstation product, and that, again, as a $300 product, this is free. One of the things is...
A $300 product. This is worth pointing out. A $300 product for VMware Workstation that's on version 6.5 right now, and just recently came out with a new version. So, I mean, really, the fact that VirtualBox, which is free for us, it has these features in it is kind of astounding.
So here's a couple of things that are pretty high-end that even some of the server-level products don't have yet, and that is... You can do 16 gigabytes of RAM to a guest. Some of the different products out there can go up to 32, but 16's quite nice. It's much
That's
more
a lot of RAM, everybody.
It also supports the standard Intel VT and VTX and AMD V extensions that give you some speed performance if you have a newer, like a Intel Core generation processor or above. The other thing they've already introduced is they have support for some of the new stuff that's been built into the Core i7 processors from Intel, which is called stepped paging, which gives you
awfully nice,
very, very fast memory management. They've already got that baked into 2.0. That's a really high-end feature that's great. On the feature list for all the next revs of Parallels and all the VMware products, but they don't have it yet. So that's one thing to consider.
This is pretty cutting edge. I mean, really, when you look at what VirtualBox offers, this is cutting edge stuff.
They also offer some the ICH6 type ATA interface, which is a faster, higher speed interface than what some of the other products are offering. They also do SCSI and Serial ATA if you have the closed source version of VirtualBox. That's kind of a standard these days, but it's still very nice to have. And it's also got some of all the standard networking things. You
can do it NAT, you can do it bridge. Basically meaning, in terms of networking, because there seems to be a little bit of confusion.
Yeah, we asked on Twitter what people wanted to know about, and this was definitely the networking stuff was big.
It's surprising, actually. So here's the straightforward. This works this way for both VMware, Parallels, and VirtualBox. It's roughly the same. You have a couple of different options for networking for how you want your guest OS that you've installed under the VMware or Parallels or or VirtualBox to see the outside world. The first is NAT, basically Network Address Translation. And basically what that means is it's going to actually share the IP address and all of your internet settings with your host OS. It's essentially
the VirtualBox virtualizer runs a little mini DHCP server that only gives IPs to your guests.
Right. Basically, it's almost like, think of it this way. Think of it as VirtualBox. Each guest is nothing more than just another application like Firefox running on your desktop, and it's using your network resources. Now, this is good and bad. This makes it easy for you to set up your networking if you're just looking to, say, browse the web, run some IRC scripts, whatever it is you want to run in your VirtualBox. However, if you want to run a server and have people connect into it,
you need to have your own IP.
This is not going to work.
Right.
How to go about that? You want to do the bridge networking.
Yep.
Now, this is basically going to say, I am my own system. Tell you whatever piece of networking hardware it is I'm using, whether it be wireless or plugged in Ethernet, that I'm my own machine. I need to request my own IP address or have my own one set up. And you'll set that up just like you do your host for your network.
And then it gets, depending on your processor support and your host OS, it either gets direct access to the NIC or it works through your host operating system's kernel and it's talking with the NIC that way, just like your actual operating system does. So it gets its own IP address from your DHCP server. The virtual guest presents a MAC address to the DHCP server, and so it gets its own unique IP, or you can statically set one.
Which is very cool. Now, kind of a third way to look at to go about this is
actually something I use a lot. This last method,
and this method is one that not as many people will use, but it is still very useful. There's in all of them there is, and they all call it something different. And I believe they call it internal.
This is where the confusion comes from.
So now under VirtualBox, it's called internal mode, and what this is it's basically allowing any guest running in VirtualBox to communicate to any other guest running in VirtualBox on the same internal network.
It can't,
but nothing else.
Right.
So this is great if you want to set up a very secure and private type network where you want to, say, simulate a server with a number of connections, or let's say, here's another great example. You want to run a web server, and you want that web server to only be able to connect. You want that web server to connect to another server that's nothing but a database server. And that database server can only connect to that web server to keep it nice and secure.
And what I will use this for, just to kind of maybe this help understand, is if I'm going to say take a client and they're on NT4 or Windows 2000, I'm going to migrate them to something else. But I can bring up their entire infrastructure on a private network inside virtualization, perform all of the upgrades and changes that I need, and run it inside this test bed without it ever actually being able to communicate outside this little box, which is very nice. There's actually one, I don't know, maybe we touched on this. There's one last type of networking where it's host only. The virtual machine can only talk to the host and vice versa.
Right.
That's nice too, just for some quick testing.
It's handy on occasion. You know, normally I tend to use NAT, which basically is the simplest, or bridge networking, just because, you know, most of the time I'm doing desktop testing and that sort of thing.
I think I generally go bridged. For the most part, I like to have my own
It makes
IP.
things the simplest. Yeah, it definitely makes things the simplest. If you're trying to let's play games or something like that, which of course a lot of 3D games are working great under VirtualBox now because of the OpenGL support, even under Linux, which is awesome. Of course, if you're doing that, you're going to want to do bridged because most games are going to have to be able to communicate back with you, and if you're running NAT, it's not really going to work.
Couple other nice things is people asked about USB support. VirtualBox has full OHCI and EHCI, which is basically full-on USB 2.0 support, so you're pretty much rocking that.
Yep.
Whatever USB device your host can see will be presented to your VirtualBox guest, and you can just go into a menu and choose which one you want. It'll show up.
Oh, and one final thing. If you are a VMware person, you can read in the VMware hard drives and actually virtual machines from in VMware and import them into VirtualBox. So if you're looking to test it out, it's an easy way to do it.
There's a few guides online, and I think this is kind of where VMware kind of trumps them. There's a few guides online for importing like a Windows partition. If you want to move to another operating system, but you still want to have your Windows system there for all programs, there are methods to import that Windows install. Because of the nature of Windows, with Windows Genuine Advantage and a few other things, there's a guide on their website in their documentation section you'll have to follow.
Now, and that's the beauty. Because this supports VMware drive images, anything that you can manage to import into VMware is going to be able to then be imported over into VirtualBox. So just kind of, you know, have your tool chains handy.
They're pushing something they call the open virtualization format, which is a open standard for for these disks. Right now,
which
VMware has VMDK, which has been open spec'd, I believe.
I believe so.
And Microsoft has VHD, which VirtualBox also imports. if you have a virtual PC image.
VirtualBox is kind of quickly becoming the Swiss Army knife, it seems like. So it would be nice
impressed.
to see. I'm extremely impressed. And plus, if you look at the release schedule, it's been very rapid. So you've seen a lot of changes happen over the last 6 months alone. So I'm curious where it's going from here. If you check out their their Wikipedia page or their forums or whatnot, you can get a kind of an idea of where they're trying to head. And a lot of the features that they say that they're working on are very cutting edge features. So it's worth checking out. Definitely give it a run.
Yeah.
Definitely play with it, because it's a heck of a lot of fun to what I like to call play with.
There you have it. All right, well, if you have any, maybe some observations, VirtualBox, we didn't catch here, we'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions, hit us up on Twitter. I'm twitter.com/ChrisLAS.
And I am Bryan with a Y, LAS.
There you have it. You can catch every different kind of format possible.
Also, you probably on Twitter want to follow me more than Chris. I'm just saying.
There's every conceivable format possible for these episodes over on our website. That's JupiterBroadcasting.com.
.com.
There you have it, everyone. Thanks so much for watching this episode of An In-Depth Look.